Will you play with me?
Let's talk a bit about imaginary friends. How can you tell the difference between a spirit and a child's imaginary friend? Most kids have imaginary friends, particularly under the age of 5. I'm not a psychologist, but I did speak to one who informed me imaginary friends at that age are quite common and to be expected, and children will carry on conversations with them from time to time. So, what's the difference between a spirit and an imaginary friend? Well, imaginary friends tend to be flexible to a situation. When you ask your child about details about them, they'll often pause to create an answer. Frankly, it's quite adorable, and at times fun to experience. Ask them what their imaginary friend looks like, and ask them again in a few days. If the description changes, then you don't have anything to worry about. But if it's consistent, then there may be something to be concerned about. The same thing goes with your child's imaginary friend's name. Ask your child what their friend's name is, and if they give you a specific name like Tommy, ask them again in a few days, and if their friend's name changes, well, then you don't have nothing to worry about. Now, if the answers to those questions remain consistent, then there's a great possibility their friend is actually a ghost. Here are top 8 signs you should watch for. Think your child can see and hear ghosts. Number 1. Your child has a history of not sleeping well at night, starting in their infancy and toddlerhood, not sleeping through the night. Number 2, your child will talk to you about other people or beings that you cannot see, but they can. Number 3, your child suddenly gets nervous and scared in public places, and often they will start looking down and averting their eyes from something. Number 4, your child frequently stares off into space, blank walls, or windows, often like they are daydreaming. Number 5, your child comes running to you scared while playing outside with no apparent danger in sight. Number 6, your child talks about people, common or uncommon animals, strange creatures, etc., that you can't see. Number 7, your child will carry on conversations with nothing. Often, they will be looking into blank space, a wall, door, window, or a mirror. Number 8, your child shares their food and drink with seemingly non-existent beings. Should you be worried about it? In most cases, no. However, you should keep a close eye on your child and watch for behavioral changes, especially if the changes are negative. I'm going to play a video for you. It's 4.5 minutes long, and it's called The Real Reason Why Kids Have Imaginary Friends.
You might tend to think of imaginary friends as one of those quirks of childhood, something you outgrow and then pretend never happened, like wetting the bed or believing in Santa Claus. It's only when kids don't outgrow them fast enough that parents start to worry. But according to psychologists, there isn't much reason to. Imaginary friends are totally normal, even in older kids. And contrary to the stereotype, they may indicate good social skills and a healthy creative mind. Imaginary friends, which researchers call imaginary companions, are vivid make-believe characters that are treated as real. They're often invisible, but they can also be a personified toy or object. And usually they're played with and talked to for at least several months. Studies suggest they're really common. Estimates vary, but one study of 1,800 children found that 46% of them had one between the ages of 5 and 12. Another well-regarded study found that as many as 65% of children have had an imaginary friend by the time they're 7. And it's not just preschoolers. Studies have found that elementary and middle schoolers interact with imaginary friends just as much as younger kids. And even high schoolers sometimes admit to having them. The stereotypes would have you believe that having an imaginary friend, especially for that long, is a bad sign. That either the kid struggles socially or that they're mentally ill. But there's really no evidence for that. While it can be kind of jarring to watch a kid talk to someone who isn't there, researchers studying these children report that they usually have a good sense of reality. Like, they'll often make sure that the researchers know their friend isn't actually real, which isn't what people with delusional disorders do. That misconception might come from the fact that children with dissociative identity disorder, popularly known as having multiple personalities, also often have imaginary companions, ones that can last into adulthood. But it's worth remembering that less than 2% of the population has this disorder, at least in North America, which means that the vast majority of imaginary friends aren't linked to it. So while children with certain serious disorders may create imaginary friends, that doesn't mean imaginary friends necessarily indicate a serious disorder. Another common belief is that kids invent imaginary friends because they don't have enough real ones. But that's not true either. For example, a study done for a 1991 doctoral dissertation found that kids with imaginary friends were less shy and had more non-imagined friends than their peers. And that's a trend that's been seen in numerous other studies. That may be because having an imaginary friend helps kids cope with stress and conflict, ultimately improving their social skills. Other research seems to indicate that imaginary friends aid social development by improving a child's theory of mind. Theory of mind, which people normally develop between ages 3 and 4, is your ability to understand that others have different thoughts and feelings than you do. For example, a 1997 study of 152 children found that 4-year-olds with imaginary companions were better at theory of mind tasks than those who didn't have them. So these kids were better able to understand what was happening in someone else's head, even though they spent so much time in their own. And being better at theory of mind at age 4 predicted better emotional understanding at age 7. These kids were better at understanding their own and others' emotions, including how someone's personality might shape their feelings, or how they respond to different situations. And that's important because studies have found that emotional understanding is a key part of developing good social skills, as well as a child's overall psychological well-being. There also seem to be linguistic benefits to having an imaginary friend. Studies have shown that children with imaginary friends create richer narratives when asked to tell a story and use more complex sentence structures when they speak. They also have a larger receptive vocabulary, which is the number of words that they can recognize and understand. If at this point you're thinking back to your childhood and worrying what it means that you didn't have an imaginary friend, you can relax. You may have just forgotten yours. Many kids simply forget about their companions when they get older. It's also possible you didn't have one, and that's totally okay. Scientists aren't entirely sure why some kids do and other kids don't, although we do know that firstborns and kids who are an only child are more likely to have them, which might be another reason why they've been linked to loneliness. Rather than loneliness, though, it might have more to do with the amount of unstructured free time kids have for imaginative play, because kids who watch less TV are also more likely to have an imaginary friend. So it's not a bad thing if you didn't have one. It's just also not a bad thing if you did. And if you see a kid start pouring tea for a giant invisible pink elephant made of cotton candy, there's really no reason to freak out. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow Psych. If you have kids or happen to know any that you want to share your love of science with, you can check out our SciShow Kids channel at youtube.com/SciShowKids. There are all sorts of great videos there, and you might find that both you and the little ones learn something new.
Here are some negative behaviors you should watch for. Violent tendencies. Watch for signs of violence aimed towards other members of your family or other children and/or adults not directly related to you, such as your child's playmates or neighbor. Sometimes these violent tendencies can be directed at pets or other animals. You can't rule out the chance that your child could be a sociopath. However, this type of disorder is not usually diagnosed for children under the age of 18. There are some signs you should watch for in your child to help determine if they could be a sociopath or a psychopath, and here are some of them. Destructive tendencies. Watch for signs of destructive tendencies, such as breaking their toys or the toys of others. breaking of household furnishings like vases, mirrors, windows, and so on. Lying. All children tell a fib from time to time, but if this behavior is persistent, and most of the time the excuses are so outlandish, you need to consider whether or not your child is being influenced by an outside source. Make-believe friends usually won't tell your kid to do bad things, okay? But if there's a negative spirit disguising themselves as a little kid, telling your child to do things, and sometimes pressuring them into doing it, then you've got a serious problem there, and you need to get some help for it. There are also mental disorders that will cause your child to behave in a violent and destructive way, along with lying for no reason whatsoever. This sort of behavior isn't common for a child, not common at all. This short video that I'm going to show you will explain two of the most common mental disorders and the difference between them: a sociopath and a psychopath.
Five differences between sociopaths and psychopaths. People often confuse sociopaths with psychopaths, which is not surprising since the two share features of antisocial personality disorder. According to the DSM-5, the main signs of antisocial personality disorder are egocentrism, lack of empathy, manipulativeness, hostility, and impulsivity. Despite these similarities, however, there are some differences between sociopathy and psychopathy. 1. Psychopaths do not have a conscience. This is arguably the main difference between psychopaths and sociopaths. While sociopaths are capable of feeling remorse and guilt, psychopathic traits include lack of empathy and lack of guilt and remorse. 2. Psychopaths are manipulative and calculating. With their charm and charisma, psychopaths can be extremely manipulative and calculating. They are very good at maintaining emotional and physical control so as to organize their criminal behavior. Sociopaths, on the other hand, are less organized and are more likely to spontaneously commit crimes. In this sense, sociopaths are more normal compared to psychopaths. 3. Sociopaths are able to form relationships with others. Because sociopaths are capable of feeling remorse, they are also capable of forming deep emotional attachments, such as with friends and family. Psychopaths are unable to do this because of their lack of empathy. 4. A psychopath's brain is different from other people's. Interestingly, the brain of a psychopath is different from that of other people. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, social behavior, and personality expression, and the amygdala, which is responsible for emotions, do not light up in the psychopath's brain scan, which means there's little to no activity in these regions. 5. Psychopathy is a more severe form of sociopathy. In sum, psychopathy is a much more severe form of sociopathy. Thus you can say that all psychopaths are sociopaths, but sociopaths are not necessarily psychopaths. So what are your thoughts about these differences? Have you ever met someone with either of these traits before? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure to check out our other social media for more content. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.
So, okay. First of all, don't let your britches get all knotted up on you. Okay? Just because your child is acting out with different violent tendencies related to being a sociopath or a psychopath, it doesn't mean they are. Okay? Little children, they don't know the difference between right and wrong. It is our job to teach them, okay? And if there's a spirit there, an evil spirit, they're going to tell your kids to do things that they know is wrong, but your child doesn't. You know, like breaking the mirror or hurting the dog or the cat or whatever, okay? And it's quite common for that to happen, okay? So keep an eye on your child, okay? And if they tell you something like, well, my friend told me it was all right, then you got something serious to worry about, okay? This last video is about a young woman. She had an imaginary friend when she was a child, and something quite interesting happened to her. Now, I'm going to let her tell you her story, and you be the judge of it. Did she have an imaginary friend? Or was she playing with a ghost?
Hi, I'm Sebi, and today I want to talk about my childhood imaginary friend, who may or may not have actually been an imaginary friend. So at this time I was maybe 5 or 6, and I don't remember all of the details. I just remember that at that age I had an imaginary friend named Sarah. I don't remember much about her. I just knew she was a little girl around my age who I thought was amazing and I liked to play with. Well, according to my biological mother, there's a little bit more to that tale. So apparently I knew this girl down to the T. What she looked like, her name, you know, just all the little details that a 6-year-old probably shouldn't actually know. Well, you know, that could just be chalked up to having a really vivid imagination. Or, you know, maybe I just spent too much time alone, I was making it up. There's a lot of little things that could go into that. But there was something else. At that age, up until the time I was 11, I remember having a little 50s Barbie doll. So, you know, ones with the thicker bodies and, you know, the bigger limbs, like an older style Barbie doll. It had long blonde hair, and it was one of my favorite toys. Well, how I got that toy is very interesting, because it has to do with my imaginary friend. So, according to my biological mother and my stepfather, when I was about 6, I came home from school one night and started bothering my stepfather, David. And I kept telling him, Daddy, Daddy, there's a doll in the vent, there's a doll in the vent. And he thought I was just making up and bothering him, and he kept, you know, just kind of pushing me off about it. Well, a couple days later, after me insistingly saying, you know, there's a doll in the vent, I want the doll in the vent, he eventually goes and grabs his tools and starts unscrewing the vent at the bottom of the little area right next to one of the chairs in our living room. Well, he unscrews it and looks down with his flashlight. And I remember the flashlight because it was this big, bulky one, like the one that security guards use, because that's what his job was. And he flicks it on, and he's looking down, and all you see is hair. Now, I remember seeing the hair. I remember being very excited about it all. Although I don't think my parents were as excited as I was. He pulls it out, and it's this little doll. And I'm all excited and I want it, and my mom will not let me have it. Kelly, my biological mother, she takes it from me, takes it to my grandmother Nancy, and they're trying to figure out how I knew it was in there. And I don't know the exact reasonings or what exactly they did, but they cleaned the doll up and they give it back to me. And they're, how do you know it was in there? How do you know that doll was in there, Stephanie? I don't know. I have no idea. Sarah told me. So, they're obviously freaked out and annoyed with me because there is a weird doll in the vent of our trailer that's not normal. But they let it go, and I have the toy, and no one ever really says anything about it, and I had it up until my trailer burned down when I was about 10. Yeah, about 10, so it was just a strange thing that happened. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the story of my little doll that my good friend Sarah gave to me. Was she a ghost? Was she not? Did I make it up? Did I just see the hair in there? I don't know. I don't really remember. I only have the information that I can vaguely remember from that age and the information given to me by my parents. So, until next time, bye.
Like I said, imaginary friends for little children are quite common. Okay? But sometimes an imaginary friend isn't imaginary. Sometimes that imaginary friend is actually a spirit. It could be an evil spirit, or it can be a spirit of a child that passed away. It's hard to tell. If you have any concerns about your child, please feel free to contact us, and we will discuss it with you, okay? You can get a hold of us on Facebook, or you can get a hold of us on our website, okay? So, you all have a good night.